I'm Jessel Noor for the Real News Network. We are live here in Baltimore with David Swanson. David, you're helping put on a conference this weekend. There's a billboard just a few blocks from here, which describes the amount of money that it would take to end and cure poverty around the world. A fraction of that money would fix the heating problems, the facilities problems in Baltimore schools. Baltimore City just spends about $17 million a year for its facilities. Many of them are crumbling. They were made decades ago. There's been decades of a lack of investment in those buildings, and it's got us to this horrible situation today. But beyond just the facilities in the Baltimore schools, teachers tell us there's not enough money for books. The buildings themselves are falling apart. There was dozens of staff and teachers that had to get laid off just this year alone. Talk about how much the U.S. spends on its military and how it compares to things like spending on education.
Well, it's over $1 trillion a year, each and every year, on the military through the Department of so-called Defense and the Energy Department, the nukes, the State Department, the Veterans Administration, et cetera, et cetera. It's over $1 trillion, and that's almost half what the entire world spends on militarism. And most of the rest of that world is NATO members and U.S. allies that the U.S. pushes and pushes to spend more, largely on U.S. weapons, first and foremost on U.S. weapons. And if you take about 10% of that, say $100 billion, that's about what we think it costs to maintain bases in other people's countries.
And how many bases are you talking about here?
Is somewhere between 700 and 1,100. I mean, there are ones they don't tell us about, that we find out about. There are ones that are said to belong to the host country, but they're essentially for U.S. troops. It depends how you count them, but roughly 80 countries with significant major U.S. military bases, you know, still first and foremost Germany and Japan and South Korea and Italy, but all over the globe, so that when I watch a basketball game, they thank the troops for watching in 175 countries. And there's several countries they're not including in that list, and there's only about 200 countries on Earth. Right now, most of those are small numbers of troops, but that's $100 billion. That's, you know, about 10%. The billboard that I can see out the window here that we put up says, and worldbeyondwar.org is putting these billboards up around the world. Go to worldbeyondwar.org and help us. It says 3% of U.S. military spending could end starvation on Earth. That's a figure from the United Nations, what it would take just to get food to people who are starving year by year, to prevent starvation and hunger on the globe, the entire globe, 3%. And people took pictures of that and sent it to me, this billboard in Baltimore, with homeless people underneath living in tents in the bitter cold.
There's dozens of homeless people that live just blocks from here that were out in the freezing cold when below freezing temperatures in Baltimore.
Yeah, so not just students going to classrooms, being required to go sit in classrooms without heat, but people at night living outside with no heat in Baltimore, and people being thrown out in the night from hospitals who are homeless in Baltimore. And you mentioned $17 million. I mean, try to figure what a fraction that is of $1 trillion. And the people of the city of Baltimore, I mean, if you go to costofwar.org and figure the cost of just the Pentagon, not the other departments, as of 2 years ago, is close to $700 million that just the city of Baltimore is paying in taxes just for the Pentagon every year. So it's probably $1 billion every year for the military from the city of Baltimore.
But someone raises the point, Al Hernandez, are Democrats any better on military spending than Republicans?
You got to squint very hard to see it. Of course, some of them are, but that doesn't add up to a party. Yeah, the conference, if anybody doesn't know, it's going to be live streamed on therealnews.com and elsewhere, is at noforeignbases.org, and you can still come. It's sold out, but we got an overflow room and discount tickets to come in. But the Democratic Party, which just gave a major assist to warrantless spying for Donald Trump, which, if you believe the leading Democrats, is allowing Vladimir Putin to spy in your living room. They are as dedicated. I mean, their leadership, Steny Hoyer, who's from around here, some of my friends were protesting in his office yesterday, and he wouldn't see them, and he wouldn't let his staff meet with them, and he told the Baltimore newspaper, the Sun, I believe, that the people refused to meet with his staff, and they printed that lie. He is as dedicated a militarist as you can find on earth, and most of the Democrats are. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is not just working to get Donald Trump the quote-unquote legal ability to spy without a warrant on you and me, but she is fighting off his impeachment, and she is dedicated to getting him more military spending, and they just upped that military budget $80 billion. When the country, not just the city of Baltimore, the entire country of Iraq is asking for $100 billion to repair, it'll never be repaired, but to mitigate the damage. And they're
damage done by the U.S. occupation.
Yeah. And what the U.S. is offering them is about $150 million. It's more on the scale of what Baltimore needs than what Iraq needs.
Yeah, that $100 billion number, this city of Baltimore spends a little more than $1.3 billion on its entire school system, which is, even the state's own studies have found, that is some 20 or 30% less than what is adequate, the bare minimum to provide an adequate education here. Yeah. So that number just, I think it resonates. It'll resonate with people in Baltimore. Another point that was raised on our Facebook feed, someone mentioned, war makes money. War is big business, but fighting poverty isn't for the people in charge. Talk about that.
That's absolutely right, and the best you get from the Democrats in Washington is a sort of a pretense or a gesture or a feint in the direction of taxing billionaires and doing something to help the poor. The fact is that you could tax all the wealth away from all the billionaires once and only once, and it wouldn't add up to what you could get from the military each and every year. I mean, this is where the money goes. If you want the kind of money that's needed for the things we dream of and the things we don't dare dream of, for decent quality education, preschool through college, for housing, for shelter, for clean energy, for transportation, for childcare, for retirement, for things to make a good life for people, it could be done, but only if we're willing to talk about military spending. And even Bernie Sanders, the leading progressive Democrat, 50 years ago he was wonderful on this topic, but he got gradually worse over the decades. Even he wouldn't say that, so he just threw himself out there to be accused of being Mr. Increase Your Taxes for fear of saying cut 5% of the military, as if that would be worse than, raise your taxes, which is, just death to a campaign.
And it was Dwight D. Eisenhower that warned about the military, power of the military-industrial complex. How powerful is it right now in Washington? We know they talk about the power of their lobbyists and other forces. Many of them in the media. The mainstream media doesn't raise this issue when it's talking about lack of infrastructure, lack of money for education, homelessness, lack of affordable housing. The last time Baltimore opened up its housing subsidy program, 1/6 of the population applied because there's massive lack of affordable housing in the city.
Yeah, I like Eisenhower quotes better than Eisenhower's record, or the rest of that speech for that matter. He knew what he was talking about because he was part of it. But the military-industrial complex, and you can add 18 other, media, academic, congressional, etc., is stronger than he probably dreamed it could ever become. It just dominates Washington, D.C., and it's the bipartisan consensus. It's the bipartisan harmony, that takes it out of the media. It's not a debate between the two parties, so it's not a topic for the media. And of course, the U.S. major corporate media is in large part entangled with military profiting and shares board members with weapons dealers and brings on guests who are taking money from weapons dealers and does not identify them as such. It's incredibly corrupt.
When they're often supporting or advocating for war or increasing military spending.
Indeed. I mean, I had a guest on my radio show yesterday, recorded, haven't aired it yet, who was trying to make a case that Russiagate was absolutely unprecedented in terms of being shut out of the media. Any opposition to this claim that Putin stole an election and so forth. And he said, even in, you know, the lead up to the war on Iraq, there was a big debate. And I said, well, yeah, but, you know, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting did a study, and it was 3% of the guests on network TV who were anti-war. So, you know, it was a debate in comparison to some debates, but I wouldn't call it, you know, fair, open, or, you know, democratic with a small d.
There's another question here about whether, you know, some people voted for Trump because they thought he was going to change the status quo. What's Trump's record been with the military and military spending?
It's been as disastrous as his predecessors, including Obama and Bush, and on back. Each has been worse than the previous. Obama set records for military spending. Trump is already breaking them. Obama, you know, essentially created the practice of drone wars and set every record, and Trump is breaking them. You know, Trump gave very mixed messages as a candidate, and Hillary Clinton gave very unmixed messages. She was going to be a militarist, and there are studies that have found quite credibly that among many other things that made the difference in swing states, that made the difference, that swing states with military families voted for Trump in opposition to Hillary Clinton and her Democratic Party wars. But when you looked at Trump's mixed messages of I'm against interventions, I'll kill their families, you know, the one thing that I zeroed in on, and that I think you always have to zero in on, was that he wanted more money for the military than ever before. When you put more money into the thing, you know, this is why we want money for schools. It matters. It makes a difference. If you put money into helping people, it tends to help people, even if there's corruption around the edges. When you put more money into the military, you're going to get more militarism.
And we covered a study a few years ago on The Real News where spending on education on schools creates something like 5 times the amount of jobs as spending on military. Because we know some people, you know, they argue that it's a job creator, we need to protect it. Where is that money going? Is that money actually going to the troops, or where is that money, $1 trillion, ending up?
Yeah, whenever they have, you know, during the course of these wars on Afghanistan and Iraq, they've had these bills year after year where they've said, pass these billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars for the troops. And if you add up how much money each troop would get if it was for the troops, you know, it's $1 million to $10 million per troop. And if you were to offer those troops that money and do what you want with it, how many of them would stick with this, you know, noble enterprise that they're killing themselves in large numbers over, largely because they can't figure out what the purpose of it is? I mean, the studies that have been done by the University of Massachusetts Amherst have found consistently that if you put the same dollars into education, infrastructure, green energy, any non-violent industry or enterprise, you get more jobs, in many cases better paying jobs. In fact, if you just put it into tax cuts for working people, not for Trump, you get more jobs. So it's actually a job drainer. It's actually fewer jobs than doing nothing, which sounds incredibly unbelievable because everybody has all these friends working the military and the weapons dealers and the military contractors and subcontractors. Yes, those people exist. Yes, they have jobs. But we would have more jobs for more people and enough savings to retool and retrain and not have anybody hurt in the process if we shifted.
And Don McCaslin makes the point, the troops are impoverished, that's why they're joining, which is true as well. Yes. You know, the military is disproportionately African American, Latino, low income. You look at the most heavily recruited you know, districts around the country, you're talking about places like Brooklyn, you're talking about places in Texas, you're talking about Queens, the Bronx, low income, areas with many low income people of color that are being sent overseas to fight these wars. Yeah. And so, you know, people have been asking us, you know, we understand there's a problem here. What do we do about it?
Well, there are a great many things you can do about it at World Beyond War, which has a website, worldbeyondwar.org. We've got campaigns you can join on getting the money out of the weapons, divestment from the weapons dealers, on passing local resolutions and local actions through your cities and states, on helping to close these bases, which is actually incredibly popular even across the political spectrum, sometimes for the wrong reasons, and it gets tricky, but there is no support in the U.S., and there's great opposition abroad, and we can join together on closing these bases and putting that money to better use. Campaigns on a wide variety of issues, including going after the recruitment, getting the military tests out of the schools, getting the recruiters out of the schools, getting the firing ranges, including all the lead poisoning, out of the schools, because there's a huge investment in that. There's a huge investment in advertising. There's a huge investment in military recruitment that feeds and builds on these vicious cycles where people don't have other opportunities. And a majority of those who enlist say a big factor was they didn't have some better opportunity. And when you don't have education, you don't have knowledge, you have people not acting wisely, not voting wisely, and having to make bad choices because they don't have a better choice. So we have to attack from a lot of angles.
All right, David Swanson, thank you so much for joining us. There's going to be a conference this weekend in Baltimore. It's sold out, but you can they'll still make space for you. You can watch the live stream at therealnews.com, and we'll link to all of this. The conference will be on our website, and keep watching, keep sending us questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Jessel.
Thank you for watching at the Real News Network.